This is an ordinance 884, an ordinance of the County of Riverside regulating targeted residential picketing. This is something that we've been working on in our office for a while. And yes, it was instigated by some protests at a church in the Hemet area that became unruly, and we felt that we need to protect those that are being protested against so that we don't have people jumping on their property, blocking their driveways, and in some cases having conflicts. I have been reading some of the blogs in the Press Enterprise, and let me state for the record that I'm not a member of the Scientology church, but I am also very respectful of the fact and happy that I live in a country where I could choose that as my religion if I wanted to. I shouldn't be persecuted for choosing any religion, nor should any one of you have any doubts or fears of being affiliated with any bona fide religion in the United States. We have freedom of religion, as you know. But there are many instances, not just this isolated incident, but there are other incidents. We saw during the passage of Prop 8 that there were many bishops and churches that were strongly supportive of Prop 8 that had some very contentious demonstrations on private property. This is in no way to limit one's ability to protest their feelings. Many of you know when we went to the Dokich issue that we stood hand in hand making sure that Mr. Dokich knew that we were not in favor of him coming into Mead Valley after he was quickly transferred from Sun City, which was my district, but he couldn't get in there because of a gated community. They wouldn't let him in. But I believe we should have the right to protest. I just don't believe that we should have the right to protest and jump on private people's property and with the potential of intimidating or hurting them. So that was the whole purpose of this ordinance. I agreed with my colleagues that 300 feet, which is the size of a football field, was too large of an area that we needed to be more restrictive. We're talking somewhere, between 30 and 50 feet from the property line that would allow people ample space to make sure that those that they're protesting against can see the protest and give people the right to assemble. So I appreciate the board's consideration of the revision, and we looking forward to hearing what the speakers have to say. If there's no comments from the board, then I'll call the first speaker, Madison Davidson. Madison Davidson.
All right. Hello and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I had today's ordinance 884, and there are a few things about it I would like to discuss. Those two being time, place, manner restrictions, and why Golden Era Studios should not be included in this anyways, and why this is basically pointless if your whole point was to keep us away from protesting it. First of all time, place, manner restrictions are unreasonable. This ordinance sets one in place, and I'm here to tell you today that they are always unreasonable. What you're doing with this ordinance is you're putting our right to protest, use our First Amendment, below people's right to not be around a picket. It's completely unreasonable, and I don't believe you, as the Riverside County Supervisors, have, well, excuse me for being so blunt, but have the authority to make this call, because it's eventually going to impact and restrict those people of other counties. They were not able to vote for any of you. We were not able to make the choice for you making laws that affect us. And so you're restricting my rights, and I'm not in your county. I don't think that's fair. You're affecting a First Amendment right, the right that Americans hold high above almost all others, the ones we fight for more than others, the one that people have died and lost their lives for protecting. Also, this is going to put your citizens above other citizens of other counties. Because if they want to come to another county like San Bernardino County, LA County, they can protest residences. But if any of those citizens of those counties come to Riverside, they can not protest here the same way. They're losing those freedoms. in the ordinance, in the actual text of the ordinance, you use the words to protect privacy in the home a lot. Well, that's all well and good that you're trying to protect the privacy of the home, and I think we should have privacy in our homes. But protesting outside of a residence doesn't cause a loss of privacy. It's when someone walks past a house, that residence doesn't suddenly lose their privacy. Protesters outside of a residence are almost the same as maybe, say, a nosy neighbor that's, can't mind their own business. But the fact is, there's no loss of privacy on the side of the residences. There is, however, a loss of a right to freely assemble. We should be able to protest outside of a residence because that's our right to freely assemble. You're taking the freely out of the First Amendment. So now on to my second point. The reason why Golden Era Studios is even exempt just from the context and the diction of this ordinance in the first place. First of all, Golden Era Studios isn't a single building on a small plot of land. It is a vast amount of land that has many large buildings on it. So when you say you don't want people
Madison, your time is kind of up, so I'll give you another 10 seconds to summarize if you'd like.
All right. Well, you can't be a captive audience on Golden Era Studios because it's such a big location, and protesting Scientology is not a singular residence. It is not a household. It's an organization. So just the language of the ordinance should make it null and void for Golden Era Studios. Thank you so much.
May I ask you a question, ma'am?
Of course you can.
You mentioned our organization, or we. Mm-hmm. Are you here today representing an organization?
I'm here to represent myself as a person.
Are you a part of the anonymous organization?
I am a person that anonymously protests. It doesn't mean I'm part of Anonymous.
Okay, that's all I asked. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Next will be Gary Scarf from Los Angeles. Gary, you're talking on agenda item 3.28 at this time. It says 3.292.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Gary Scarf, and I'm one of the individuals that has peacefully protested outside Golden Era Production Studios. I am a former Scientologist. I am a former member. I actually worked within the Office of Special Affairs, also referred to as OSA, which is the intelligence arm of Scientology. As a former Scientologist in Department 20, which is the Office of Special Affairs, known as the church's dirty tricks department, I involved myself in overt and covert operations, which against critics and other perceived enemies of the church. You have to understand that in Scientology, it's very totalitarian. And Scientologists have been known for picketing psychiatric facilities, psychiatric organizations. In fact, they've picketed the consulate and embassies of the German government because of perceived wrongs by the officials over there against Scientology. Yet, in Scientology, one is not able to picket or protest against abuses within the Church of Scientology. Scientology considers anyone that is the least bit skeptical or critical of anything within the Church of Scientology, whether it's abuses, child rights violations, is criminal. You are considered a hate monger. In fact, anyone that leaves the Church of Scientology is immediately labeled as a suppressive person, an SP, a criminal, a hate monger. And this is absolutely wrong, and this ordinance is absurd. And as much as respect as I have for you, Mr. Stone, I really believe that you're colluding with the Church of Scientology to pass this ordinance, because this is nothing about protecting residents, any more than saying the UC Riverside as a residential dwelling because there are residential dormitories on that campus. Are you also going to say that students of UC Riverside cannot protest anywhere on the campus because there are residential dorms on the campus? Golden Era Productions, I have been outside the gates of Golden Era. I have never been arrested. I have never worn a mask. Everyone knows who I am, and judging by the number of unannounced visits I get from Scientology officials to my home, they're very aware that I'm protesting. They're not happy with it, but they're aware I'm protesting. The other thing is that there are members of Anonymous or people that associate with Anonymous who still think that I'm a member of Scientology, that in fact I'm a spy working for Scientology for the mere fact that I have a very personal concern about the abuses within the church. but I don't demonize Scientologists. I have friends and people that I still love and am very concerned about that are still in the church. I would like to see them out of the church, but I don't demonize them because of what they believe in or why they're in the church. I protest the abuses in the church. So please, I ask you to really consider the facts behind this ordinance. This ordinance is not about protecting a residence just because there's some apartment complex on the south side of a huge compound, which basically is a film distribution studio and a film studio. This is about impeding the constitutional rights of our ability to protest.
Thank you, Gary.
All right? Thank you very much, sir. And thank you, Mr. Stone.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Francois Chiquette. Okay, Mr. Berry, if you'll please come up. And you have been given some time by Patricia Curtis. Is Patricia here? Thank you. So you have a total of 6 minutes, Mr. Berry.
I doubt if I'll need it.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is Graham Berry. I'm an attorney. I'm not representing anyone today. I'm representing myself. I've had 20 years of experience in litigation against the Church of Scientology, and I have picketed personally at Gold Base. There is no need for urgency on this ordinance. Nothing is happening today or has happened that did not exist last year. Instead, the board should require further revision of the ordinance. Gold Base has employee accommodation on both sides of Highway 79. So the opposite side of the street revision does not save the constitutionality of the provision. It only makes it worse. The proposed ordinance is not about targeted residential picketing. It is about targeted Scientology picketing. At noon yesterday, 2 people anonymously picketed Gold Base for 30 minutes. Scientology broadcast ear-shattering pipe organ dirge music and summoned 3 cars of Riverside County sheriffs who frisked down the 2 protesters and demanded their identification, despite the US Supreme Court holding in a number of cases that anonymous protesting is legitimate to prevent retaliation. If the proposed ordinance is passed in its present form, in future those 2 picketers could be arrested for targeted residential picketing. So the proposed ordinance should therefore be revised to provide in essence that it does not apply to any residential building that is part of a mixed-use property, whether religious or secular, such as Gold Base, which includes offices, media, and other production facilities. Scientology has not denied that it is engaged in a commercial enterprise. Instead, it claims to be exempt from the Labour Code provisions because it has religious volunteers. There are several main reasons why Scientology is demanding these pickets stop. One reason is that if Scientology staffers hear and see the picket messages, they will wake up, snap out of their mind control, and try and leave the Scientology organization. Some have woken up and have escaped. Most are chased down, dragged back, confined, and re-indoctrinated. And this leads to the second reason why they demand these pickets be stopped. Whenever a picketer is outside of Gold Base, the entire Gold Base goes into lockdown. All staffers, except for a few security officers and private investigators, have to go inside and close their eyes and ears to whatever they may hear or see coming from the protesters. So that is the bottom line of what the county is being asked to do here, to shut down First Amendment rights so that a free and tax-exempt commercial enterprise does not have to insulate its cheap labour force from hearing the truth and waking up from the abuses, crimes and frauds being committed in the name of religion. As a St. Petersburg Times editorial has concluded, the Church of Scientology is like no other church that we know. Accordingly, the proposed urgency motion should be rejected and the proposed ordinance sent back for further revision, expressly excluding residential and targeted buildings that are part of mixed-use properties, as I have explained. The President of the United States does not get an exemption from picketing because he lives upstairs at the White House. Neither should the leader of the Church of Scientology. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Berry. Susan Elliott.
In 1995, a woman named Lisa McPherson died while in the custody of the Church of Scientology, and protests against the church occurred. In response, the Church of Scientology sent this flyer to protesters' neighbors saying, "Your neighbor is leading a Ku Klux Klan-style rally." Fast forward to 2008, when a totally new group of protesters has taken root, this time sparked by a free speech issue, as well as the mistreatment of staff and the breaking up of families. The protests have taken place for the past 11 months in 130 cities across the world, including Paris, London, Washington, LA, New York, and even Israel. In response, the church produced this document, portraying the protesters as racists and hate mongers. This document was sent around the world, including to New Zealand, where it was sent to a man's employer in an effort to get him fired because he was a protester. Fortunately, the employer saw through the ruse and the man kept his job. Slandering critics is what Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard instructed. Here's just one sample of what he wrote in 1975. Quote, "Find or manufacture enough threat against them to cause them to sue for peace. Originate a black PR campaign to destroy the person's repute and to discredit them so thoroughly they will be ostracized. It is my specific intention that the use of black PR tactics on any opposition so that any opposition be permanently eradicated," unquote. Unfortunately, this document has been passed off to the supervisors of Riverside County by the church, who are using it as the impetus to pass an ordinance against picketing a residence. Protesters who are trying to warn the public about the fraud and abuse of Scientology are compared to the Ku Klux Klan, a horrible group associated with lynchings, cross burnings, and hangings. And that's a painful situation to be in. I personally know most of the 17 people who have protested in Hemet, and none of these people are represented in this document. But the bigger tragedy of this ordinance, if this ordinance passes, is that now and forever, the 2 million people in Riverside County won't be able to protest in certain locations against certain organizations. The church will be treated specially by this ordinance, since the church conducts its business in the same compound in Hemet where many people say the worst abuses occur. The church can never be picketed. Did the people of Riverside hope that the supervisors would decide for them who could be protested against and who couldn't when they cast their votes? Is that really what the people want and expect? I urge you to reconsider and vote no. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Elliott. Donald Myers. Can you state the city you're from, too, sir?
I'm sorry,
What city are you from?
I am from West Hollywood, California.
Thank you.
And the first thing I want to tell you is that if I knew this was going to be such a big deal, I would not have worn sneakers. So I apologize for that. Anyway, I am here today because I have been protesting at Gold Base about 3 times. I was one of the people who was there yesterday who was frisked by the police and had my stuff taken. They were very cool. It was just it didn't bother me at all. But I wanted to do a little show and tell here because we've talked a lot about Gold Base, Golden Era Productions, but I haven't shown you any pictures of it. This is a picture I took a couple of months ago of barbed wire facing inside.
Sir, you can put it.
Oh, sorry.
On the screen. There you go.
This is a picture of barbed wire facing inside. You can see the spikes right here. And why would an organization like this have spikes facing inward? Gold Base is where Scientologists dream of going. It's got a lake, a golf course, horse riding. The trouble is that when they get there, they find that it is a slave labor camp, and that lake they saw is what they will be thrown into when they are being punished. Now, people talk about having a right to any religion that you want, but people who are held captive, including some of the highest level people in Scientology, like Heber Gents, cannot get out. They cannot speak. So it's important that we have the ability to try and speak for them. So we go there and we say things that don't even sound like they make sense to you. Free Heber Gents. What's a Heber Gents? Or let's talk about body thetans. Let's talk about Xenu. It means nothing to us, but to them it is secret words that deprogram the cultist inside. So after a few protests, I suddenly noticed these huge black speakers. And as we approached them, suddenly I heard this enormous rumble, like an electric dinosaur stomping all around me. And suddenly the sound grew louder and louder, became like this high-pitched whine, like you're holding 3 organ notes down at once. They had installed a giant surround sound system on both sides of the highway to drown out our cries of Xenu. That is how they are censoring us. And this is another way that they're going to try and censor us. So I beg you not to pass it. I have the noise that they make. It's really unbelievable to hear on my cell phone, but you don't allow them, and I think it would probably overwhelm your sound system anyway. But the evidence is here in like pictures that I've taken just recently. And the police heard the music too the other day. They can vouch for it. There's plenty of videos on the internet of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Myers, for coming down. Next speaker is Francois Chicat. Doesn't seem like a big deal. Mr. Al-Hadif, Sam Al-Hadif.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Board. I'm in a little bit of a conundrum. I'm a Lutheran, so I don't know whether Francois follows me or what, but I'll defer to him. I appreciate very much the opportunity to visit with you briefly. First of all, this is not about religion. This is about a residential ordinance called targeted picketing of residences. There is no doubt that there are a number of apartments on the campus and that it is a long campus and that there are many areas where these people will be allowed to continue to picket. The constitutionality of this particular ordinance has been vetted and refined. We have listened to County Council. We worked with County Council to give them our thoughts and suggestions, and County Council has independently arrived at what they consider to be an appropriate distance factor. It's been upheld in the 8th Circuit. In fact, the 300 feet has been upheld in the 9th Circuit, as we talked about before. There are many counties that already have such an ordinance. There are many cities that already have such an ordinance. I listened to the first speaker, and the first speaker said that the county would be treating people differently. Well, actually, the city of Riverside has an ordinance. It is 300 feet. City of Palm Desert has such an ordinance. County of San Diego has such an ordinance. City of San Diego has such an ordinance. So there are many cities across the country because they want people to have the balance of right of freedom of expression, freedom of speech, but also the right to privacy in their own homes. And what we're asking for is that these people be treated the same way. I really don't believe I should discuss religious discussions here. I don't think that's an issue at all. I will simply say that every person has a right to their own freedom of religion, as the chairperson has pointed out. I'm happy to answer any questions. I also have a member of the church who also resides at the campus who could speak if you wish. But I think this just isn't about religion. It's about an ordinance that is commonplace in many counties and cities. So I think we'll just leave it at that unless there are specific questions.
Thank you, Mr. Al-Hadif. Catherine Frazier.
Unless there are specific questions about a resident, I don't think we should get into any more religious discussion.
Just had a card. Thank you. And last speaker, unless anybody would like to speak before the board, please fill out a request to speak form. Francois Chicat.
Thank you for allowing me the privilege to speak. In my opinion, and the opinions of many of us here, this ordinance is specifically tailored to prevent picketing at Gold Base International, Scientology International Headquarters. I'll get to this exactly on the next page, but I'd like to address you specifically, Mr. Stone, as a pharmacist. Let's talk about medicine instead of religion a little bit. Scientology is anti-medication, as evidenced by their long history of opposing psychiatric drugs and other drugs such as anti-seizure medication for epileptics specifically. The record in that area is extensive. There was a lecture given by L. Ron Hubbard in 1972. Let me just quote 2 lines from that. And the doctor will call up plaintively, asking you to please put her back on the drug because she needs this. And you will get into a collision between medical treatment and so on. Now, we've been using a lot of medical words here, chemical words really. Just don't pay attention to them because they're mostly gobbledygook. You have a honorable profession. Do you consider it gobbledygook? That's L. Ron Hubbard in 1972. Okay? 2008 has shined a light on Scientology's medical practices. The death of Uwe Studenbeck, a man who died decades early because of inadequate medical care at the PAC base in Los Angeles, a building we call a Big Blue. Isaac Hayes died of a very unfortunate death, probably because of inadequate treatment for his stroke. After a man has a stroke, you don't put him on a treadmill, okay? Mario Majorski, an untreated schizophrenic, which you might have seen in the news, that the Scientology guards shot in the head after he brandished some swords at him. Jeff Travolta, dying at 16 due to a seizure, which could have been avoided due to proper medication. I see the yellow lights on. Let me just say, the picketing ordinance language was changed very specifically here to, instead of away from residential dwellings, to property line. So here's the deal. There's a map of Gold Base here, okay? Here's the guard shack. 50 feet, 1 foot from the guard shack in the language here is completely irrelevant because they changed it to property line. They have 700 acres there, which means that we will not be able to protest effectively and give our message to the people there. I believe you've been tricked, okay? It's all over the blogs. I think you should have been able to see that. This whole thing is a trick to make you think that it's to prevent keep calm in the area, but this is not it at all. They're trying to prevent protesting altogether. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I don't have any more requests to speak. I appreciate everyone that's come forward today, especially those, a majority of which came out of the county to come here and make their issues known. To counter some of the things that were being said, this is not something that was brought forward to scrutinize any religious institution. This certainly, the incidents that we've seen at Golden Era certainly was an impetus to understand that we don't have any legislation in this area, and there have been other incidences that are not affiliated with Golden Era that I've mentioned before that have caused some issues in the county, and therefore we look at and see what other cities and counties have done to allow for peaceful demonstrations and allow for people that are being demonstrated against to not have people marching on their property and being threatening on their property as well. I think this ordinance was carefully written. It's been vetted in the Ninth Circuit with a greater radius than ours. We've lowered our radius to make it possible that you can be close to those that you're protesting against effectively. And I felt it was my obligation to bring it to the board for consideration, and that's why we're seeing it here today. I believe anybody should practice any religion they want to, whether it be Scientology, whether it be Buddhism, Judaism, Christianity, Catholicism, Muslim. People come to this country because they know that they can worship and not feel persecuted for worshiping the religion that they wish to participate in. There's a lot of allegations that have been made against Scientology. This is not the forum for that. If you have a complaint, you need to go before the grand jury, make a complaint with the district attorney's office, and it is their job to follow through with investigations where you allege certain crimes of kidnapping, if you will, or holding people against their will is occurring. And I encourage you to follow through with those efforts, and we'll be happy to give you the district attorney's address here in town for those of you that are out of town, or the grand jury, which is right across the street, where you can make a bona fide complaint. But those are not the issues that this board will be entertaining. We're entertaining this as a residential ordinance. We've made it possible in comparison to the last reiteration that it allows for people to protest closer to the residents that they want to protest against. 300 feet was just too far, and we made it now 50 feet. It's being proposed to the property line. I don't even have a problem lowering it to 30 feet, but I wait for my board members to weigh in. Supervisor Buster.
Well, just in the instance that we're referring to here out on Gilman Springs, is there a safe spot that comports with the ordinance within a reasonable distance, either on that side of the Gilman Springs or immediately on the other side, where this ordinance allows for picketing?
I believe they can go on the other side of the street. Mr. Al-Hadaf, can you verify that? I know it's a pretty topographically challenged area, but
Yes.
yes. Any other comments?
Yeah, I'm not, I didn't clearly understand the answer. The question.
There is room for people on the other side of the road to fall within that 50 feet from the property line to effectively protest what they believe to be problems within the religious institution.
Well, if it's talking property line, then it's talking about the whole compound, isn't it? And won't they have to be 50 feet from the compound? And the compound is on both sides of the road from, well, takes in a large geographic area. And what I'm afraid of is by passing this, we will eliminate the ability to for legitimate protests at the the Blue Dome place.
If I might address that for a moment.
Yes, I'm sorry.
The ordinance does not prohibit general protesting, only protesting directed at a targeted or particular residence, and it does allow for protesting on the opposite side of the street. That is an exception in the sidewalk space, and that area is the area between where the street ends and the right-of-way, the improved area from the street to the property line.
So, just to follow up, so even though the property on the other side of the street, in this case, or maybe in other cases, may be owned by the same property owner, same homeowner, it still would allow that if the principal entrance and exit to the property is on the other side of the street.
It's directed at targeted residences. And so if the protesting of a targeted residence, you could protest on the opposite side of the street from that residence.
To answer Supervisor Wilson, Supervisor Buster, what County Council has done is given you defined terms. So in the ordinance itself, at Section 3B, it defines targeted picketing, and then at Section 4, the prohibition is against picketing activity that is targeted. So there's plenty of places where people could voice their particular viewpoints and come well within being close to any area except the residence. Does that make sense? So the answer, when I said yes, the answer is there's many places along there that they can picket.
So there's no ambiguity about what constitutes the residence here, in as much as there may be residences in this case in many areas throughout this entire complex of compounds.
There aren't, when you say within the entire area, the residences are really limited to an apartment complex on one side and individual homes on another side. So within this 2-mile stretch, there are a number of places where picketing could occur. In fact, it could occur across the street from residences as measured by the 50 feet, because that's the way the exception has been set up.
Mr. Haddock, the studio, as an example, they have a very large studio that makes films for worldwide distribution. If they wanted to go right up to the fence and protest, this would not affect their ability to protest.
It doesn't affect that area, or if they're in the residential area and they go across the street, as council has indicated, they are allowed to peacefully demonstrate there.
This only puts a radius, basically, that is in front of or adjacent to a residential unit.
Yes, that's correct.
That's all.
All right, if that's the case, I think it strikes a fairer balance here.
County Council agree with that? Because we have maps here, and this, if you look at the compound, it's a large, let's say it's not the Church of Scientology, let's say it's General Motors, and they are, again, killing the electric car or something like that, and people want to legitimately protest it. Are we preventing that by saying this large factory compound can't be?
Unless they have residential units, Supervisor. Those are all commercial. They can go right up to the property line.
That's right. You could generally protest, and you can protest in front of any commercial entity. What this governs is protesting particularized residential dwellings. And you can protest across the street. It's an exception to this ordinance.
So at the main entrance to the Scientology
campus
film production studio, they could demonstrate there. Is that correct?
That's correct. What happened yesterday, just a clarification, is that the two individuals that spoke today forgot to say that they stood in the middle of the entrance, and they wouldn't move, and that's why the sheriff had to come out, and they were very respectful. They finally moved when the sheriff came. That was the only thing. You can't stand in the middle of the street or in the middle of an entrance.
So, for the record, by passing this, we are not prohibiting legitimate legal protesting at the Church of Scientology's compound in Hemet. Is that
That's correct.
Any other questions? Will of the board. I'd like to move adoption of Ordinance 888. I think that it has the protections to ensure First Amendment rights, and it will protect residential people from people coming onto their property and taking away the quality of life of those that are being protested against. And
I'll second it. But if the gentleman has his hand up, he might. We brought Mr. Al-Hadif up. We might let him talk just to balance it off there.
I'd just like to point out that there's residences on both sides of that highway. I just want to know absolutely for sure that, first of all, I don't want that ordinance passed at all. It's unconstitutional. It will tie you up in court. And I tell you what, I'm not doing this as a hobby now. I'm on this full time. And we will go and file suits. You have a budget to fight this, possibly for months and years, okay? I want to again emphasize that there's residents on both sides here. We want to know exactly, and give you the map, circle the areas where we're allowed to protest, okay? By the way, there should not be any limits at all, okay? But I want to know for sure exactly where we can protest, okay? Should I give you the map?
You got the map.
if you'd like to leave it, we'll be happy to point that out. If you leave it with the clerk, please.
Well, if you have, if you came to a situation where you had a house on one side of the street and there's a house on the other side of the street, it looks like you'd have to move down the street 50 feet away from those houses, and you're still there. You can still raise your voices at 50 feet's not even that wall. I'm not even sure this is.
You could protest both residences at once.
I don't want anybody standing in front of my house, waving a. I don't like that much.
Just, Mr. Chair, from a practical standpoint, if a group's out there under the new ordinance and is attempting to protest and trying to find out where they can protest in conformance with this ordinance and do so safely also, who's going to be the arbiter of that? Are we going to work with the Sheriff's Department in this case so that they can, and maybe Transportation Department in some cases, so that if there's ongoing protests, I would urge that the county arrive at some procedure so people can get a defined area where they can legitimately protest. And particularly if they're bringing in new people or protesting, they need to have this information as well. Can we ask, as a follow-up to this ordinance, can we ask for a procedure to be set up so that they can know this and have some assurance that where they're doing so comports with the ordinance?
By all means, I'd be happy to amend my motion. Supervisor Ashley, you'll amend your second to that.
Could you also include a report back in, let's say, 6 months of how many instances we've had to enforce this ordinance, and complete description, what happened, where was it done, and so forth, because I'm very uncomfortable with this ordinance.
Okay, I'll include that in my second, if that's in your motion.
I'll include that as well. I think we need to see the success of what we've done, and we'll modify where we feel we need to modify in the future. So with that, I'll ask the board to please vote.
With waiver of the reading of the ordinance.
Yes, please.
Introduction of ordinance number 884, an ordinance of the County of Riverside regulating targeted residential picketing.
Please vote. Let the record reflect that's passed 5-0. Do we need to do 3.29 separately, or do we do them together? Okay, I'll move 3.29, adoption of ordinance number 888, an urgency ordinance of the County of Riverside regulating targeted residential picketing.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Please vote. Let the record reflect that that is unanimous at this time. That concludes our policy calendar.